Okay, so welcome everyone to Peer's May meeting. We're glad to see you with us. My name is Catherine Zoka, and I'm co-chair of Peer. Tonight, as I mentioned, we're privileged to have Lieutenant Governor candidate María Archila with us, and she'll be here in about 10 or 15 minutes. We'd like to start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. Peer primarily is graced to live on the ancestral territories of the Montaukett and the Shinnecock Nations, whom we work with often on different advocacy projects. Peer is a multi-issue grassroots organization committed to advocating for issues that impact all Long Islanders and all throughout New York and nationally. Those issues include healthcare, housing, climate, and social justice. And the way we do that is through electoral politics and activist issue-oriented engagements. So what to expect tonight? We are going to start with a discussion about the redistricting, which has been quite a, I don't know what you would call it, a volcano of activity over the last several weeks. And Catherine Levy and Jerry Maslanka will talk about that. And then we will hear from the Lieutenant Governor candidate, Anna Maria, after which Melanie Dorigo, the Democratic candidate in CD3, will join us to talk about redistricting, about women's rights issues, and about the campaign. So why don't we start off our discussion right now of redistricting, and so I'm going to turn it over to Catherine or Jerry. I'm not sure which one is going to pick up, but please do.
Yeah.
Jerry,
Catherine, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
I presume that a lot of you know, first of all, can you all hear me? Because I have unstable internet.
Yes.
Yes. That's why you have a picture of me rather than me live. I presume that all of you know some of the background of what's gone on. We had Republican-leaning maps for a long time. There was supposed to be a bipartisan effort to change the districts. That fell apart. The supermajority in the legislature of Democrats were able, because they were a supermajority, to take it over and try to redistrict, frankly, to benefit Democrats. A lot of us feel that they overreached, and they came up with some pretty strange districts, one of them being Melanie Dorigo's district, CD3, which ranged across 5 counties at one point, from Suffolk County to Westchester. And a judge in Steuben County ruled those districts unconstitutional. He appointed a special master who was supposed to be neutral, but the special master, through whatever kinds of backroom machinations, has come up with a new map, which we are stuck with, which is once again leaning Republican. So probably one of the candidates who's coming out best in this is Melanie, because she's got a much better district than she had a month ago. In CD1, which concerns all of us so much, we are back to the situation that we had for many years, which is that a large swath of our district is west of the canal in areas that are dominated by Republicans. And that is going to make it a much more difficult district for a Democrat to win. I mean, we're back to the electoral situation that we were in the past, I'm sorry to say. And CD2 looks almost guaranteed for Republicans. There are a number of other problems in New York City and Westchester and the Bronx. CD17 was redistricted. Sean Patrick Maloney, who's the head of the DCCC, decided that the district that he lives in, CD18, was too competitive, so he decided to run in CD17, which was Mondaire Jones' district. And Mondaire Jones, instead of opposing the head of the DCCC, moved to CD10, which is nowhere near where he lives. And so can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Continue.
Catherine, we hear you.
Yes.
So several progressives are now running in CD10, which is not ideal. We are probably going to lose a seat or two in the Congress and seats in the state legislature as well. So that's where we stand at the moment.
Jerry, you want to add anything to that?
I'm not so sure. That was pretty thorough. The only thing, and maybe this is more a question of Melanie, for Melanie later on, has to do with the overall view of Long Island and all of the CD districts, and how there's a fear that it could become like the old CD9. There's overwhelmingly government, GOP controlled. And I don't know, Catherine, if you have read anything about that, but if the Republicans are as successful as they seem to think that they might be, we could lose a number of districts. The most favorable, as you said, being CD3 with Melanie's district. So the only other thing I would talk about is if there's any
Casey, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're excited that the district is now contingent, right? I'm originally from Westchester, and when I looked at the map, I was like, I don't know how y'all did this, but this is the ugliest thing I've ever seen.
Excuse me, just one moment, Casey, if I could. I just want to introduce you. Casey is campaign manager for Melanie Dorigo, who's running in CD3. Thank you.
This went from being a very safe Democrat seat where, like, you win the primary and you're likely to win the general, to Biden got 52% of the vote in 2020 as the district currently stands. Now, given the history of midterms, regardless of either party, that's going to make this a tough race. This is going to be a very tough general election. When I signed on this race, I signed on because I really like Melanie and thought she was a great candidate, but I also thought she was the strongest candidate in this race. And I think more important now than ever, we need a really strong candidate to come out of this race, because it's going to be a rough year for Democrats. Like, let's not like sugarcoat it. Democrats don't do well in midterm elections. I was a little young for 2010, but it was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so I think, we're excited. I love a good primary, but I love a good general even more. But this is going to be a very highly contested seat. Republicans are going to dump a ton of money into this seat because, this is as swing as it comes. This is as swing of a district as it comes now. And like I said, we're excited for the challenge, but this is no longer the safe seat that it was when, I had my first round with interview with Melanie, which was literally the day that the maps were ruled unconstitutional.
Thank you, Casey.
So,
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate that. I mean, I'd also like to say to the general audience, from my understanding is that CD3 is a D+6. So I think while it's not as good as the redistricting initially made it, it still looks good for the Democrat once the general election comes around. And just getting back to a broader picture, I wanted to let folks know, in case they had not heard, that there is not going to be a primary in CD1. So that Bridget Fleming is going to be running in the general election. She will not be primaried, so there will not be an August primary. Kara Hahn has stepped out of the race. And Jackie Gordon, who had been in the race previously, was redistricted out of the district. So what that means is that Bridget has the opportunity to start her race today for November. And while it's not going to be an easy lift to get her across the line in CD1, we don't have to look at a primary in August to have to be concerned about. So those are maybe what one could call silver linings in the overall picture. Also, going back to CD3, Biaggi dropped out of CD3. Biaggi was really one of the primary progressive opponents of Melanie's. She's no longer in the race, and her dropping out enabled Melanie to get the Working Family Party's endorsement. So there's some good things to have to hold on to. And, you know, it's all about turnout when it comes to these primary elections, especially in off presidential years. That's why we're here. So, okay, so with that in mind, I'm just going to ask Catherine if she's got an update for us from Anna Maria.
Yes, Dan Coates, her field director, says that she'll be on any moment, but perhaps we could just show that wonderful video of her as we're waiting for her.
We will do that. Okay. Hang on a second. Okay, so you can all see my messy screen, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Unfortunately, we have these incidents here.
New York is a place that welcomed me as a young immigrant and allowed me to feel at home in a new country. It's
When
a place where I found this.
the general was briefed by the FBI that there was going to be.
Excuse me, I'm going to ask somebody if they're to everyone to mute themselves. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
New York is a place that welcomed me as a young immigrant and allowed me to feel at home in a new country. It's the place where I found the safety to love who I love, to be queer and proud. It's where my children were born, where they first looked at the sky. New York is one of the richest states, and it should be a place where everyone is able to live with dignity. But our state is falling short of that promise. Affordable housing is impossible to find. Healthcare is out of reach. Gun violence is rising, and essential workers have been left behind. Meanwhile, our state is riddled with corruption and leaders listening to big donors not working here. We will not accept the politics of business as usual. I have spent 20 years building organizations that allow everyday people to have a voice in our democracy. I know that a more just New York is possible, but to achieve it, we must always speak truth to power.
What you are doing is allowing someone who actually violated a woman to sit in the Supreme Court. This is not tolerable.
My name is María Archila, and I am running for Lieutenant Governor to be an independent voice for working families. We are living through multiple crises: COVID, inequality, climate change, and the crisis of leadership. What drives me is the courage of people who take care of each other and stand up for one another. The task of elected officials must be to match that courage and lead boldly. I am running to honor the courage of people by ensuring that all New Yorkers have an affordable home, excellent health, high quality education, and a livable planet. I am running to shine a light on our state government so that it prioritizes the needs of working people who call New York home. Together, we will build a New York for the many, not the few. Let's get to work. New York is a place that welcomed me as a young immigrant and allowed me to feel at home in a new country. It's the place where I found the safety to love who I love, to be queer and proud.
All right.
Nice.
Very, very good.
Dan is still saying any minute, that she will arrive any minute. So
I'm here.
Excellent.
Hi.
Fantastico. Welcome.
I was doing a session of family therapy with my kids, and anyways, apologies, but I'm here.
Wow, welcome, Anna Maria. We're so pleased to have you with us. I'm Catherine Zoka, co-chair of PEER. I just want to let everybody know a little bit about the framework that we'll have. Anna Maria will talk for 15-20 minutes. Catherine Levy will kind of guide that discussion. Afterwards, we'll have Q&A, and Tina's going to monitor the chat if you want to drop in the chat question you might have, and then Tina will call on you. But let me just first introduce our special guest this evening. Ana María Archila has been a leader in New York and nationally in the fight for immigrant rights, for LGBTQ rights, for women's rights, for workers' rights for over 2 decades. She was born in Colombia, but has spent her entire adult life here in New York. Ana María co-founded Make the Road New York, who we've worked with frequently over the last several years, as well as the Center for Popular Democracy and other grassroots progressive organizations. So she's dedicated her life to fighting for the rights for all peoples and for the dignity of working people. So thank you. Let's give a very warm Zoom welcome now to the next Lieutenant Governor of New York, Ana María Archila.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for being so flexible with me as I was, you know, juggling the different, just the different scheduling things. I am so grateful for the opportunity to talk with you tonight. I'm speaking to you from Ithaca, where I just met with a group of Starbucks workers who've been organizing a union and local elected officials who are fighting to pass good cause legislation, and folks who are also working in rural communities around Ithaca with farm workers and to win access to healthcare in rural communities. And, you know, everywhere I go across the state, there are people doing really incredible work to take care of one another, to fight for one another, to build community and to build power that's rooted in communities. And I have been so moved really by the resilience of people and by the real commitment that people have to take care of one another, not just their most immediate family members, but actually their communities and their friends. And as you said, I came to this country when I came to this country from Colombia when I was 17 years old. And I was extremely lucky to find myself inside the immigrant rights movement really early on in my life here in the US. I started organizing for a community organization that my aunt, my dad's sister, had founded. And when I went to her a few years after I arrived in the country and said, I want to do work with young immigrants like myself, because at that point in my life, the experience of migration had been both the most challenging, the most formative experience. And I said, I want to do youth organizing and youth activism and arts. And she said, great, come help me open an office in Port Richmond, a neighborhood in Staten Island where there is a fast growing Mexican community. And I imagined myself doing activities with young people who were in school. And what I found was that there was, in fact, a community of young immigrants, 15, 16, 17-year-old people in their early 20s who were not living the lives of young people. They were working 10 and 12-hour days, doing construction work, doing stocking shelves in delis or in supermarkets or in working in the kitchens in restaurants, and getting their wages stolen, getting paid less than the minimum wage. And at the time, the minimum wage was $5.15. And many of the people that I was working with were getting paid $3 and $4 an hour. And they were living in really dilapidated housing in this neighborhood. But even with all these like very challenging, difficult circumstances, people would come to my office, this tiny storefront on Port Richmond Avenue at the end of a long day. And they would say, I'm here, I'm ready to learn English. And it was so powerful to be in the presence of people who were so resilient, but who were able, they weren't just resilient, but they were able to actually hold their dreams for themselves alive in the midst of all the exploitation and indignities of doing invisible work. And English was not just the instrument to negotiate sort of the daily life, but actually the instrument to pursue their dreams. And I understood then that people's dreams are a very powerful force that drive people's efforts all, throughout their lives, the dreams for themselves, for their families, their love for their families and for their communities. And the things that are hard about people's lives are often the result of policies that compound inequality over time. In the case of these young people, our country's immigration policies, which made them so exposed to exploitation, but also New York's housing, the reality of the lack of affordable housing, the reality that workers in our economy are so exposed to abuse, and that we don't have an infrastructure that really supports workers to the extent that we should. And so I spent 20 years building organizations that allow immigrant communities in New York, and then Black and Brown communities all across the country to be powerful, to be taken seriously, to build power that belongs and that is rooted in these communities, and to be respected in our democracy. I helped build and lead Make the Road New York, as you said, and then for 13 years I did that, and then I went on to build and lead the Center for Popular Democracy, which is a network of community organizations like Make the Road, but in 33 states and Puerto Rico. And I just stepped down from my role as co-director of CPD in December. And I was looking at the state elections and looking at sort of the environment in my community, and noticing that people are very tired, very fatigued from the chaos of Trump and COVID and Cuomo, and it's just like, it's been a lot. And in the midst of that fatigue, the forces that control our economy and that make it hard for people to have affordable housing and good jobs, we're really reorganizing and reorganizing themselves around the governor. And it felt like the election was going to be more like a coronation, that the outcome of the election was predetermined before people had an opportunity to cast their ballot. And when that happens, when we have elections that seem more like coronations, the communities that lose are always the communities that are most marginalized. Working class families, immigrant families, Black communities, Latinx communities. Honestly, in New York, middle-class families that are struggling to pay their bills and make ends meet. It's not just the poorest New Yorkers that suffer when elections are not actually real opportunities to drive, to present an agenda, to invite people into a vision of the state that includes them and that uplifts them. So I decided to accept the invitation of the Working Families Party to run for lieutenant governor because I could see that a campaign that was very different, that came from movements from the outside, could be an energizing force in the election, and could also be a campaign that would create space in the conversation for the issues that matter to people. And right now in New York, even though we live in one of the richest states in the country, we live in one of the most unequal states in the country. We live in a state where most people are really, really stressed out about the cost of living, about the cost of housing, whether they are renters and rents are rising, or whether they are homeowners and buying a house is increasingly hard, and paying property taxes is extremely hard, and maintaining the house is extremely hard. So there's many different elements to housing, but everybody's stressed out about that. And people are also stressed out about the challenge of balancing sort of work and care, whether they are caring for children, or whether people are caring for elders, or whether people are elders and trying to access, the care that they need. There's a lot of stress and sort of insufficient support for families on the infrastructure of care. And it feels like in a state as rich as New York, people shouldn't have to be so stressed out about whether they can afford childcare or whether they have enough money to pay rent. And so I decided that to propose a vision of the Lieutenant Governor's office that could be a sort of reimagined role. For the entire time that I have been a community organizer, the governor's office, regardless of who was the governor, the governor's office was always the obstacle we had to overcome to improve access to education, to make sure that immigrant children could access college, to raise the minimum wage, to win protections for farm workers, you name it. The governor's office is the obstacle we always have to overcome. And the lieutenant governor was sort of like nowhere to be found, not that useful of a presence, but you often just used as a representative of the governor in ceremonies, like a ceremonial role, really. But I think that's wrong because the lieutenant governor is directly elected by the people in the primary. And so it should have its mandate. That mandate of that office derives from that fact. And the power of that office derives from that fact. So that office should be more useful to the people. Instead of being a ceremonial representative of the governor, the lieutenant governor should be an advocate for people whose issues get drowned out in Albany. And the reason why we need that is because Albany, and especially the governor's office, is just encircled by lobbyists and donors from the industries that dominate the agenda, the economy, and the conversation. So in that environment, most people lose. And so I see the lieutenant governor as someone who can partner with the governor to address the things that are important to New Yorkers, but someone especially who can partner with people, with organizations, with champions in the legislature who are trying to advance an agenda that meets people's needs and that helps alleviate the pressures that most families are facing across the state. And I have been very moved by the energy that I am encountering every day when I meet with people, whether it is Starbucks workers who are organizing, or whether it is, farm workers who I met with in Livingston County on Sunday, who are working very hard to win the right to overtime after 40 hours, not 60 hours as they have it right now, or whether it is tenants in Rochester who are fighting to pass good cause legislation. All across the state, people are doing incredible work and need as many allies as possible in Albany to elevate the solutions that help people live with a little bit more breathing room and a little bit more dignity, so that there's more space for people's dreams in the midst of what is a very challenging reality for a lot of New Yorkers. So let me stop there because I want to have the conversation instead of just continuing to talk. So let me stop.
I have questions to ask, but I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat, one of them from one of our core committee members, Julia Sheehan. Do you mind, Tina, if I just say what? Oh.
No, you could go ahead. What happened? Did we lose you?
Can people hear me?
We hear you. We hear you well.
Why don't I just, this is Julie Sheehan, hi. Why don't I just jump in and ask the question myself, which is, I'm a professor at Stony Brook.
Well, Tina, why don't you ask?
Julie, would you ask your question, please?
Sure. What I'm curious about your vision for higher education and how you imagine the lieutenant governor role could play a bigger part, especially in funding decisions and in our upcoming union negotiations.
Mm-hmm. So I think the lieutenant governor could be always, and I would be a lieutenant governor that would want very much to support the efforts of workers who are unionizing or who are negotiating a union contract. I obviously believe that unions are an essential institutions in our country, in our democracy, in our economy, and I think it's really important to demonstrate that commitment by actively supporting people, and when the campaigns, when the efforts to negotiate the contract are happening. Sort of in general, that is my posture as someone who has come from organizing. I also think that often in Albany, people are asked to just wait and wait and wait for funding to be available or for investments to happen. And I really think that in New York, we don't lack money. New York is a very, very well-resourced state. What we lack is a focus on the priorities that are very important to people, and education, from cradle to higher education is an essential aspect of our economy, of people's lives. It is the system that allows people to pursue their vision for themselves, their dreams. So it's really important to invest in education. Sorry. There was a time when New York State taxed millionaires at a more fair rate in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And during that time, New York built a world-class university system, which is SUNY. New York built public parks and a lot of public infrastructure and housing, like Michelama housing. And we have stopped asking the richest New Yorkers to contribute their fair share, and we have asked everybody else to give and give and give. And then we tell people that there is no money. But if we can look at the recent examples of when we raised taxes on millionaires, like last year, raised taxes just a little bit, and that produced a surprise surplus of $10 billion. And just last week, I think, the comptroller released a report saying, wow, there is another surprise surplus of $3 billion. So taxing millionaires just a little bit produces resources that are really important and that should go to the things that are the core priorities for most people. And the priorities that I hear are education, whether it is, childcare that really recognizes childcare workers as an essential part of the education system instead of the way that people are treated now. Obviously, our schools are K through 12 and colleges. We cannot have the economy that is vibrant without an amazing university system. And we have asked the university systems, the public universities, to wait and wait and wait for years and years and years for the right investments, because we are putting public dollars in things that I don't think are right, like investing the public dollars, post-COVID in a stadium in Buffalo seems like the wrong thing to do when there are 43% of kids living in poverty in Buffalo. Where there is a food desert and where there is a community that only had one supermarket. And when that supermarket was targeted by a white supremacist, killer, then people don't have a place to buy groceries. And it seems like we should invest public dollars in the things that make people, that are more direct investments in people. Universities, hospitals, public schools, housing, the care infrastructure. And we need to actually ask everyone to contribute their fair share. And, you know, in every society, everybody gives and everybody takes. That's just a fact. That is how societies work. But the question is whether people give their fair share and take their fair cut. And I don't think we're asking people to give their fair. I don't think we're asking the richest New Yorkers to give their fair share. And I think we are allowing the richest few to take an unfair cut of the pie. And I'm not just like saying it like, I'll just give you these facts, which when I say it, it like blows away people's minds. In New York, we have 125 billionaires. And so they could fit in like one living room, potentially like a big living room. And these billionaires have accumulated just during the pandemic, $228 billion in new wealth. $228 billion is $8 billion more than the state budget, just to put things in perspective. And we're not taxing any of it. It's sitting in there in the stock market as unrealized gains. And in the meantime, we are telling SUNY that there isn't enough money to invest in the public university that, you know, should be treated as like a treasure and a jewel of the state. So all of that to say, I think universities are essential. I think SUNY in particular is incredibly important, and we need to treat it as such.
The next question comes from Catherine Zoka. Do you want to ask it yourself, Catherine, or do you want me to read it? Okay, please talk about your campaign ground game and your path to winning, and how can we help?
Thank you for that question. So the campaign ground game is, well, because this is a statewide race, a lot of the campaign needs to be visible to people whose doors we may never touch. So social media and radio and cable will be the primary ways that we reach just because of the scale of the state. That is the core strategy. But we have gained the support of organizations up and down the state, and committees, you know, Democratic committees or organizations like yours that, you know, up and down the state, of people who are like deeply rooted in the different parts of the state, and who will, you know, activate folks over the next several weeks. The other aspect of the campaign that will be activated over the next several weeks is actually partnerships with people running for office. We haven't yet endorsed anyone, partly because we were, you know, we launched a campaign at late February, like right before petitioning started. And we had to build very, very fast a ground game to get on the ballot. So that was our first ground game. And we got 40,000 petitions from across the state. So we were able to do that well. And then we went into a phase sort of post-budget negotiations in Albany and post-petitioning process, a phase of actually just introducing me to a lot of elected officials across the state. You know, I have been a person in the movement for a long time, but not sort of in traditional politics. So a lot of elected officials just were wondering like where I came from and who I was. So there was a lot of, you know, accelerating the relationship building. The folks who are more movement-oriented elected officials or candidates, we have been in the fight together long. I see Melanie D'Arrigo here. Melanie and I spent many days in DC fighting against the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, against the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. Like, we've been in the trenches. So there is a crew of electeds or candidates who sort of are more coming from the movement, with whom I had relationships, but I spent a lot of time accelerating relationships with others, and it's really paid off. We have built, our campaign has the broadest support in terms of organizations and local and elected officials. We have the endorsement of Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, Congressman Jamal Bowman. Today we rolled out the endorsement of State Senator Julia Salazar and Assemblywoman Emily Gallagher. Tomorrow we're rolling out more endorsements from state electeds. And so there is that partnership that will facilitate the presence of the campaign in all sort of corners of the state. But as someone who comes from organizing, I really wanted to just spend most of my time on the doors, and my campaign staff broke the news to me that this was not going to be a door knocking campaign like most, state assembly and state senate and even congressional races are. This is a different kind of campaign, which sort of broke my heart. But what I've done is actually spent a lot of time in community with people. Like, just today, I met with Starbucks workers and other folks in Ithaca. This morning, I was in Seneca Falls, meeting with folks who are fighting to protect the Seneca Lakes and the Finger Lakes area. Yesterday, I was in Rochester, meeting with tenants. The day before, I was in Sullivan, not in Sullivan, and just on the outskirts of Rochester, meeting with farm workers. The day before, I was in Buffalo, meeting with clergy leaders and other folks who are organizing in Buffalo. So the ground game is not as many doors. It's like meeting with people and building relationships that then will in the next 4 weeks.
So Ana Maria, we wanted to ask you one more question. I know that you have to go, but this group has been fighting for years to try to pass the New York Health Act, as so many people have. And an elected official we're close to, I won't say the person's name, but said to us at one point, the problem is the governor. So what role do you think the lieutenant governor might have in trying to push this essential piece of legislation finally through the legislature?
Oh, man.
Sorry.
No, this is one of these fights that you're just like, really? Like, we're saying this is not possible. Like, in the middle of a global pandemic, we're not just going to go for the deepest, best, most clear solution to make sure that everybody has access to healthcare. But here we are. I mean, the New York State Health Act is it's not just a bill that would make healthcare available to everybody. It would reorganize the economy. It would make it possible for small businesses to thrive because they wouldn't be competing with, the responsible small businesses that are offering healthcare to their employees would not be competing with, playing. I'm lacking the language. This is where English is like failing. Anyways, it would not be stuck in an unfair competition with folks who don't provide the same level of benefits. It would, access to healthcare would transform sectors of the economy that benefit from a profit-driven healthcare system. So it is, it's a big, big reorganization. And there are forces that oppose it. The governor, in this case, is an obstacle, but not the only obstacle. So I think that that's a dynamic. The way that I envision the lieutenant governor's office is an office that is actually elevating these solutions that are bold solutions that are within our reach if we dare to actually be courageous and tackle all these systems that are holding back because, you know, of small self-interested approaches to the big problem. So I see the lieutenant governor as being a voice, an amplifier to the fights, and an uplifter of the people who are leading the fights, and the solutions that they are proposing that are the boldest, most far-reaching, and most actually appropriate solutions to the challenges we're facing. And I am 100% a supporter of the New York Health Act. And I know that this is a fight that is a very, very difficult fight. And it's one of the issues where I would probably, if we have, let's say, a Governor Hochul, if she's the one that wins the primary, we would be, I would be in there would be a contrast between our positions, and I would be partnering with organizations all across the state to lift up these solution, which is honestly the only real solution to a healthcare system that is extremely broken.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful ending, but do you have a closing statement for us, or anything you want to say to Melanie, who's about to take the stage?
I want to say to Melanie that I am so proud. You're doing great. And you go get them. And to you, I just want to say thank you for the work that you do that makes it possible for people like Melanie and for people like me to run for office, to capture and sort of channel and be a vehicle for the energy of people who are all across the state, you know, taking care of one another, fighting for one another, fighting for what we deserve. I really think that it is the courage of people who do that, that propels change, that makes change possible. And I think the task of elected officials is actually to match that courage and that vision. That is the task. And I think people deserve elected officials who will stand with real people above the interests of the industries that tend to dominate the conversation. And I am very excited to be in the midst of people who do that every day. So I appreciate the invitation, and thank you for being flexible with me on the timing.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I just want to add my thanks as well, Anna Maria. We appreciate you coming on. And I just want to also say that in the chat, Vivian Valoria Fisher dropped in that she's very impressed. She wants to work on your campaign. I don't know if you know Vivian, but she was in the Suffolk County Legislature for many years and ran a very great campaign for CD1 a few years ago. So drop in the chat how we can be in touch with you. And I note that Julie already dropped in the chat how we can contribute to your campaign. So everybody, please click on that link. You know, $5, $10, $27, whatever you can is going to be very helpful. And we look forward to working with you over the next several weeks. So,
yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the offers of support. Thank you for offering to help. Thank you for offering to donate. As you probably know, we are not the big money campaign. We are the people campaign. And I am so excited to be in this with you all. Really, thank you.
All right. Thank you again. Have a good evening, and we'll look forward to working with you in the future. So now we're gonna pivot. We have with us the wonderful candidate from CD3, Melanie Dorigo. But before we bring her on, I wanted to ask Katerina Masarovich to just talk a little bit about a wonderful fundraiser that we had for Melanie last month. If you could unmute yourself, Katerina, that'd be great.
That too. I thought my face would be enough. Yes, in April, Peer hosted a fundraiser for Melanie, and it was a fundraiser. It was also a meet and greet for Melanie Dorigo, who by now you know is running for U.S. Congress in CD3, and with the redistricting change now, she's even in a better position. It was a very successful fundraiser. We raised over $2,000, and the reason that we do this and that's important to keep doing this, is Melanie has spent $9.50 on her vote in her last elections, whereas Swozy spent around $150 for vote. So we need to help Melanie be able to keep the fight on. There is another fundraiser coming up towards the end of June, and I'd love it if people could join or donate. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Katerina. And we will drop in the chat a link to the fundraiser that is coming up at the end of June, June 25. It's a Saturday and it's from 3 to 5. We have an incredible host committee, and you will see that when you go, once you go to the link that we drop in. But now let's hear from Melanie. And before we bring her on, I just want to say that Melanie is one of the most impressive candidates running on Long Island that I've seen in several years. As a working mom of 3 kids, she really understands, kitchen table issues like a lot of candidates really do not. And she is got a tough battle in front of her, but I think that her campaign is very efficient and effective. They've been knocking on a lot of doors. And it's all about turnout when it comes to primaries. So I think we're going to see Melanie on the ballot come November, as long as we all kind of roll up our sleeves and lend a hand. So at this point, why don't I just turn it over to Melanie? She's going to talk a little bit about the redistricting that's happening and how it might impact her, and going forward, how we can assist. So please, let's give a nice warm welcome to Melanie Dorigo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I had to jump on a little bit late tonight, so forgive me if I'm being repetitive, but before I kind of get started, and I would love to certainly tell you all a little bit about me and then talk about the redistricting, but I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the just tragic loss of life today that happened in Texas. Unfortunately, it has become the norm for our government to allow Americans to be murdered in grocery stores, on subways, at concerts, in movie theaters, and repeatedly and horrifically in their public schools. For me, it's particularly agonizing because I had a very unconventional and rather unsafe childhood, and school was one of the only places I felt safe as a child. And it seems that every day our government sends this message to our families that we're not safe in our communities because they fail over and over and over again to pass legislation to protect us. And I'm just really angry right now because it doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. As a mother and as a longtime member of Moms Demand Action, I am just, and like I'm sure many of you, feeling just so over this partisan, excuse my French, bullshit. It's just really heartbreaking. And as I think about, the challenges ahead, it has never been clearer to me that it is in this moment that we need leaders who are just relentless and unafraid to ruffle feathers and challenge the system that has really allowed us to suffer when, unnecessarily, because it's just so easy to pass legislation that can help so many people. We're here, we're a campaign that, we're fighting to fix society because frankly, it is mind-blowing that we have representatives who would rather stay in office than pass legislation to keep children safe in their schools. And look, this was true when I ran last cycle in 2020, and it's as I said, it's more true in this moment today. But I am here, and I'm sorry, I just had to get that off my chest because I'm really angry. I'm really, really angry in this moment. But for those of you who don't know me, I'll just, quickly tell you a little bit about me. I am running, and I have been running time believe everyone should have high quality health care. That's why I am championing Medicare for all, the morally and fiscally responsible policy to make sure that no one is left behind. I'm a Green New Deal champion because, well, like you, I have eyes and I understand that climate change is no longer theoretical. It is knocking on our doors, it is knocking down our trees. And for once, we have a solution that meets this moment and takes the people who are traditionally left behind and puts them at the front of the line. And that is exactly what the moment needs. You know, I'm fighting and have been a fighter to corporate out of politics because policy shouldn't be for sale and neither should politicians. That is why I have vowed to never take a cent of corporate money. I also don't take real estate money. I don't take fossil fuel money, and the list goes on and on. But just, you know, quickly, I am a lifelong New Yorker. I grew up in Suffolk County. I started my family in Queens. I'm now raising my 3 amazing children in northern Nassau County. I'm an organizer, I'm a healthcare advocate, I'm an LGBTQ nonprofit co-founder, and I am a candidate that is unafraid to challenge those who want to discard working class families. You know, as a candidate, I have been a working party's family champion. And when I do get to Congress, I will be the working families champion that Long Island needs and Long Island deserves. Look, we all know too well the frustration of our representatives. You know, they come around and they have for decades. They come around and they make us the same promises while they take money from, you know, health insurance execs, fossil fuel CEOs, the horrific NRA, all of whom we're sitting out here on this meeting in our daily lives, in the streets, all of whom we're fighting against. So, you know, I'm here tonight certainly to tell you a little bit about the redistricting, but I'm also here to ask you to join me. I want you to join this campaign for change, and I know many of you have, but this is a historical campaign. You know, we can finally break down the old boys club of Long Island and usher in a new vision, one that centers all of us and leaves none of us behind. You know, I should have said this. I see Sharon Golden on the call. She's going to kill me. Melanie D'Arrigo, for those of you who may not know, and I am running to be the next representative in New York 3. I'm running to be the first woman to ever represent the seat, but I'm also running to be the first progressive congressional representative that Long Island has ever had. I know that we can win. I know that, look, it's not lost on me that this is the people's house and that this is a seat that belongs to each and every one of us. And while I may not be necessarily your district representative, I want folks on Long Island who have been part of this campaign to know that this seat belongs to all of us, because that's exactly how it should be. With regards to redistricting, wow, has it been a roller coaster ride, frankly. I've run for 3 different seats this particular cycle, but we're feeling quite confident. New York 3 has finally landed on northern and mid-Nassau County. There's a tiny sliver that dips down into the southern part of Nassau and northeastern Queens. We've got a really big base in certainly in northern Nassau, certainly in northeastern Queens, but we're not taking a single day for granted. We know that there are some big lobbyists and organizations that like to spend against progressives that are now, you know, in this race. So we know we're going to be up against the big money. So, you know, our biggest tool and our biggest line of defense is our organizing, right? We've got all the organizers on our team. And they're getting desperate, right? Because they're already starting the whisper campaigns against us. And that's okay. That's okay, because we know what we're fighting for. We have a mission. We are the only campaign that is laying out a vision for change. And frankly, I do feel that we are not only best suited to represent this district, but we are in the best position to win. With this primary now being moved to August, we know it's going to be a depressed turnout. This is, you know, a big vacation week, so we're going to need to organize like we've never organized before to make sure, you know, folks are voting early or they're voting by mail if they may be, you know, going away on vacation. But we can absolutely win this district, and that is not something that we've been able to say in Long Island for a real long time, that a real unabashed progressive can win this seat. I will say, and feel free to judge me for this one, but I honestly believe that I'm the only one that can hold this seat in the general. Because we've seen it. We've seen what happens on Long Island when we run wishy-washy Republican light Democrats. We lose. If we have to excite the base if we're going to win, and our campaign is the only one doing that. That being said, as you all know, apathy is thick in the air, so we do need help. If you can join a phone bank, because I know y'all are kind of far. I know no one likes to be on the phones, but we promise we'll make it fun. If you're able to knock doors, if you're able to get involved in some way, if you're able to, somebody in the district that you can introduce us to, if you know of any other organizations in the district that we may not know, we really, really do need the help. But I'd love to, I probably talked longer than I was supposed to, but I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Okay. Hi, Melanie. It's Jerry. I turned my video off because I think I'm having a little, and I hate to do that. I may do it again. But as you said, things are crazy and shifting, and we really want, we want to get you in that seat. And something that's happened with, I want to talk and shift and talk about women's rights and reproductive rights with the Supreme Court decision that seemed to give a little boost to the progressive or the Democrats because of women's rights. And I'm wondering, in your view, this decision that they've had, what is or are the implications and the impact of this decision on women and their reproductive rights? But also, I want to look at this from a wider lens, and not only on women's rights, but the rights of other groups and individuals and vulnerable individuals, but and other rights that may be threatened by this. This is, I feel like they've attacked us as women because we now cannot control our bodies, with this threat. So what can you speak to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think these are terrifying times. They're terrifying times. And I know you all know that, and I'm preaching to the choir in the Zoom room, but I don't think that the average person who's not really paying attention is really aware of just how terrifying a time we're in. So, I think in all likelihood, Roe will be, severely gutted, if not overturned outright. This has been in the works for, many, 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 many decades here. And to your point, Jerry, this is just the first domino to fall, right? So if we talk about, just reproductive justice, we know, because even already today, we know that, even with like the Hyde Amendment, that is still intact, right? Where it adversely affects poor women, Black and brown women, Indigenous women, the LGBTQ community, young women, or young people with a uterus, right? This is the state of today. And we all know, and I feel like, almost a broken record at this point, there's no such thing as banning abortion, right? We're just banning safe abortion. So what this translates into is that people will die. Make no mistake, people will absolutely die. So I think, the stakes are higher than ever. And, when Anna Maria was just on and she mentioned that we've been in the trenches together, we have been many times. And, we protested Kavanaugh, we protested Amy Coney Barrett together. And I think, we were there because we knew that this was coming down, the pipeline. We could see it. But this is the first domino to fall. We know that same-sex marriage is also on the line. Gender-affirming care, which we're already seeing being attacked, is going to be on the line. Even healthcare in general for the LGBTQ plus community is going to be on the line. We're hearing a lot of murmurs of segregation coming. I mean, there will be no end to the culture wars, and there will be no end to the attacks on our civil rights and our human rights. So I think, this is a big fight, and this fight, look, just as the abortion fight isn't just about women, right? It should be a fight where we all join together, allies and those of us with a uterus. But the same is true for the fights coming ahead. This is a fight for our rights, and we should not sugarcoat that. I believe, we have to fight back with everything that we have. And of course, it's really popular right now to hear politicians talk about how pro-choice they are. And great, thanks for joining the team. But this moment requires more than a sometimes choice Democrat. It requires more than a write a check Democrat. We need a real champion and a real fighter in DC. We need someone who's going to go to the mat for us. I'm the only candidate in my race that has laid out a platform or policies that would really fight if we were really a pro-choice champion, what we need to do. And I think it's very simple, right? We need to end the filibuster. We do need to codify Roe, but we also need to expand the Supreme Court. And any candidate who is telling you that we can't expand the Supreme Court or that's radical, like there are some opponents in my race that are saying they're pro-choice that think that expanding the Supreme Court is radical. They're not really serious about securing reproductive rights. They're not serious about it because the writing is on the wall. And we've been sounding the alarm for a very, very long time. I do think it's going to be an election issue, but like everything else, it's going to be cutting through the misinformation. How do you know? This is the case that we always find ourselves. We're the ones that are paying attention. We know the records of our candidates, but the average voter doesn't. So, someone who's anti-choice could knock on the door and say, absolutely, I believe in the right to choose, right? And people don't know, they say they believe it. So, we've got some work ahead, but we do think it's going to be a significant issue in the election. But more importantly, this is the fight of our lives, because we're not just fighting for abortion, we're fighting for everyone and every domino that they're going to try to knock down after they gut Roe.
Yeah, I think the reality is we're fighting for our democracy. This is such a clear distinction between, do you want democracy or do you want autocracy with oligarchs? And that's the path we're headed. We already have minority rule because the popular people, the majority want gun control. They want common sense gun control. They want reproductive rights. There's a number of issues, healthcare, and yet you have.
Did Jerry just freeze, or was
she
it?
did? Yeah, she just froze.
Well, I was going to ask you a question about the court anyway. So I think it's important for you to talk as you.
A minority that is controlling this is the election of our lives.
So Jerry, I just broke in while you froze to ask Melanie a question about the court. Yes. I'm sure you're aware of the Judiciary Act in the House that is co-sponsored by Mondaire Jones and others. You have spoken very eloquently about this issue that a lot of people don't know about. Could you just talk about the historical precedent for changing the size of the court? I've heard you talk about it. So
yes, and that's thank you for bringing that up, Catherine. So I think it's really important. If we don't know, it's easy for us to get swayed. But the reality is that there's nothing radical about expanding the court or rebalancing the court in this case, right? Because what we have seen is an increasingly right-wing extremist Republican Party pack the court with justices who are chomping at the bit to go against precedent, right? So some people will say, oh, well, you shouldn't pack the court. And to that, we should say, well, the court has already been packed. What we're trying to do is rebalance the court. And the truth is, since the inception of the Supreme Court, the number has fluctuated. It has been greater, there have been more, there have been less. This is sort of, the norm, in fact. It has been, holding at 9 for quite some time now, but it is not, it's not new. It is not a new idea to add some justices to the court. And frankly, I really truly believe that it is our only option, because we see what's happening. I don't think in our lifetimes we ever would have thought that we would be in a place where Roe was about to get overturned.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yes.
Because, as you mentioned, the courts, we've always felt they have been our last bastion to protect us. And now we see where that is going away. So, but what I was trying to get at before was about this is, the time, the election of a century to protect our democracy. And there are table issues, but I'm not sure that people are looking at how big that is, that they are focusing on the kitchen table issues, the taxes, the healthcare, et cetera, when it is much larger, it seems. And how do we address that or talk with people about that? Does it help? Do you think it helps? I mean,
so as an organizer, organizing 101 is meet people where they're at, right? So we should not assume that someone only cares about taxes, which is what you're always told on Long Island. People only care about taxes, right? That's what we're always told. I can tell you on the doors, that's absolutely not true. Taxes is not even in the top 8 issues that come up on the doors. Yeah, people care about it. No one wants to pay more ever for anything, right? But that is not necessarily what makes people vote. So I ask people at the doors, I give them a little intro about what I care about, and I ask them, what do you care about? What's important to you? And more often than not, people engage. It's very different in a post-Trump world than a pre-Trump world, because before Donald Trump, I had many more conversations at the door where people did not know and couldn't articulate what issues they cared about, but people have a lot of opinions now, which is a wonderful thing. That's wonderful. That means they're paying a little bit more attention and they're more engaged. And sometimes it is kitchen table, but ultimately at the end of the day, my policies that I'm running on are very people-centered. And, I can really bring any of the policies back to an issue that someone cares about. So if someone talks to me about taxes, like I'll get them talking, and what they'll really start to talk about is that they can't afford their mortgage. They can't afford their rent. Their healthcare bills are out of control, right? So it's very rarely is it just, one switch that we can fix. It's the intersection of many issues, right? So I can talk about healthcare, or, even small business owners who will say, I can't afford healthcare for my employees and I'm barely scraping by. And well, let me tell you how Medicare for All will help your small business, right? And when you educate folks and you bring them in and you do so without judgment, which I think is a lot easier after having a little bit of distance from Trump. We're not such hotheads. We've been able to work with our volunteers and train them to really listen to people and really engage in honest and passionate conversation, which I guess is, it is deep canvassing. That's sort of, it's become such a buzzword the last couple of years. That's always been the kind of canvassing that I have done, because I think it's the most effective, right? And it's what really moves the needle. So yeah, kitchen table issues are important, but I can tell you the kitchen table issues that I'm hearing about, obviously as issues arise in the news, people are of course talking about that, but consistently, healthcare is really important. For those who are paying attention, addressing climate change is really important. And people are struggling to live and they don't know why, right? They don't know why, they don't know what to fix. They're just mad. And that's what happens when we force people to suffer and we make it really hard for them to live. So, I think it's really offering the solutions. Well, here's how free college would help your family. Here's how universal childcare would help your family. Here's universal healthcare would help. I am a proponent of ending means testing, as you know, Jerry. And I think that would be wonderful in this particular district. And it has not only the benefits of boosting our local economy and helping a lot of our struggling middle class families. I think it also combats a lot of the rising hate and the othering that we do toward each other. So, it's ultimately, that was a very long answer just to say that meeting people where they're at and having those real conversations is how we move the needle.
Right. Well, Catherine Zoka, how are we doing on time here? Do we need to pivot to something else or questions?
I think we can pivot to questions. If there's anyone who has a question, you can drop it in the chat. And I just want to pick up for a moment on that, Melanie. And because I do see in the general election, once we get you, running on the ballot in November, that the Republicans will be using those kitchen table issues against you. And I think inflation and gas prices, as a lot of people on Long Island, really concerned. So I understand how you are trying to pivot from maybe one concern to other concerns. How are you dealing with inflation and gas prices if you've encountered them on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I can tell you at the door, look, that first week when gas prices spiked, everyone was talking about gas prices. A lot of the more conservative pundits in the forums are, well, what do you think about inflation? And I don't know how many reports we need to read that tell us that corporate profits are at, all-time highs, egregiously so. And look, I think this is why I think I'm the only candidate that can win the general, because while you'll find other candidates fumble around and talk about in pocketbooks are really hurting, is because of price gouging. It's corporate greed. And that's nothing new. That is absolutely nothing new. But we need a candidate who can punch back, right? And that's what I've always done. And frankly, I think it's why we get a lot of respect across the board, and because we're not afraid to center our people, right? And you'll hear this with bail reform too. I'm sure sometimes, some of my consultants might be like, but I'm like, yeah, bail reform was important civil rights legislation. It absolutely was. But let's talk about why you have a problem with bail reform. Well, my community is not safe. You live in Nassau County. It's literally the safest county in the country, right? So we'll have those conversations. And I think it's just cutting through their nonsense, right? It's not about, fear is a powerful motivator, but so is hope. Right? So when we can have a conversation and say, okay, you're scared about your house getting robbed, you're scared, whatever it is, right? Okay, well then let's address the root cause of crime, because we have funded the police, to an ungodly degree. And I will often tell folks, if this is their issue, well, we haven't defunded the police. In fact, we've done the opposite. We've given them a lot more money. And Nassau County, I have to get the statistic. It is something wild where we actually have a police budget that is higher than many, many countries. It is really like their military, like that. Just the Nassau County police budget. It's one of the largest police budgets in the country. It's just astounding. But I do talk about addressing the root cause of crime and funding education and funding healthcare and funding housing and creating more green spaces. And, even the angriest, bail reform was such a mistake, folks. I can get them to the place where I think we can work with them, right? By having those conversations. So, I think that Republicans have been masterful at keeping Democrats on the defense. They've been masterful at it, and we chase our tails as they continue to roll back our rights. I don't know about all you, but I've had just about enough of that. So I'm ready to go on offense. And if I have to bring the whole damn Democratic Party kicking and screaming with me, that is what I'm going to do.
Okay. Great, great. Thank you. We have one last question in the chat that we'll ask, and then after your answer there, we're going to want to hear from you or have folks drop in the chat how we can help your campaign. But Francesca Rhiannon has asked, how is the campaign countering the massive disinformation campaign of the fossil fuel lobby on climate?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's an ongoing battle. I think it's similar to what I was just saying. It's really punching through the nonsense and calling out outright the lies and the misinformation. What I find with climate in particular, it really runs folks in circles, because a lot of the language we use when we're talking about climate change and like CO2 emissions and, the average person has no idea. They just don't, right? Because it's not in our common vernacular. So it's through a lot of education, our campaign in particular, we're just like this tiny but mighty campaign, the little train that could. But I think we have done a pretty good job at putting out content. We're very fortunate. For those, a lot of you on the call know, my husband is also like a super lefty, like all of us, and he's really talented. He works in advertising, so we'll concept ideas and we'll put out information. We've done a lot of this for healthcare. We've done it for climate, and we're going to continue to do that in hopes that, we create these sort of shareable, they're not really memes, but you know what I mean, like these sort of shareable content pieces where we can get that out. And then of course, every chance we get, if we're in a forum or if I'm on a podcast or TV and I have the opportunity to punch back and cut through the lies, that's what we do. But I will say, Francesca, if you have any ideas, anything that you think we could be doing better, feel free to, share that with us. And, we would love, we'll take all the help we can get.
Great. Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Melanie, listen, we are behind you 100%. We wanted everyone on the call to know that we've dropped into the chat. Casey dropped in a couple of links for volunteering, also for contributing. I just dropped the link in for our big fundraiser at the end of June. We hope everybody can join us and spread the word. So thank you for your time tonight. I know that, every day you're out knocking on doors. We wish you well. We're with you in spirit, and we'll get some people on the phones and maybe some people to walk with you. It's an experience not to be missed if you have an afternoon to spare. So thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. Thanks for the work you do. We got this. Let's go. Let's go. We got this. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. So now we're going to wrap up with some announcements. I know I'll start out with a very brief announcement. On June 4, the first ever Pride Parade is happening in East Hampton Village, and it's going to be at noon. So come to it. Afterward, there's going to be a party in the park with a DJ and, lots of festivities. I happen to be involved. I'm going to be one of the grand marshals. So come and see me in a red Thunderbird. Anyway, so that's my announcement for tonight. Jerry, I think you have a couple as well.
Hold on here. Okay, my internet, I'm just getting a little discombobulated here. There is a petition that, the hearings for the January 6th insurrection is coming up on June 9th. And Common Cause and People for the American Way have a petition that they would like us to sign so that these things are broadcast, because we feel that this is really important for the public to hear and see. And just as the insurrection was widely covered, we'd like this to be widely covered. So I'm going to put that in the chat about that. Let's see. And it's a link to sign the petition. Okay, and I'll get that in there. If I mess something up, we'll get it in the notes that will follow. Perhaps we can do that, Catherine.
Sure.
In addition to that, the voting team committee, we have talked about doing flyers and doing some flyering to reach beyond our social networks, the digital networks and emails and social media, et cetera, and starting to create some flyers that and enlist volunteers to come and hand out. And this would be related to the various campaigns we're supporting, and for Melanie and Anna Maria, and also it's escaping me at the moment. Jumani, of course, and our SD running for
Skylar Johnson.
Skylar Johnson, yeah, running for it. So we would be doing flyers and getting out the vote, because that seems to be the thing that Democrats are falling down on a little bit, is really getting our people motivated and out to vote. But we really have the candidates to make that happen. So we just have to inform people. So I think that's it on my announcements.
Thanks, Jerry. I noticed that Sharon Adams from Peer and East End Action Network dropped in the chat that the North County Peace Group is having a pop-up action at Zeldin's Patchogue office tomorrow at 3 p.m. The group is looking to ask the Big Lie Lee why he opposes the New York red flag gun protection law. So that's tomorrow, if anyone can make it to the Patchogue office at 3 p.m. And I'll just put an ask out. Is there anyone else who has an announcement that they would like to make? And if not, I guess our meeting is over for May. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you at Melanie's fundraiser at the end of June. And thank you all for your time. I see some messages coming in, okay. So everybody have a good night. Keep the faith. We've got a great candidate in Melanie. And if anything we've learned during the pandemic, it's been that if all Long Island pulls together and works, we can really make effective change. And that effective change is having Melanie's new address be Washington, D.C., come next January. So anyway, that's our goal, and we're going to make it happen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.